Night fell the way a verdict does, final and heavy, leaving no room for appeal. The wind sharpened, carrying the kind of cold that crept inward, searching for bone and memory alike. Frostfall Ridge withdrew behind its doors, while beneath the sagging awning, Etta felt the world narrowing to the slow rise and fall of Ash's chest. His breathing grew uneven, each inhale a small effort, each exhale a fragile surrender. She stroked his head in steady rhythm, as if her hand alone could remind his body how to continue. "Stay with me," she murmured, the words shaped more like a promise than a plea. She had kept promises before. She wanted fiercely to believe she still could. The snow swallowed the streetlight across from them, leaving only a dull halo that flickered and dimmed. In that thinning light, Jonah returned. He moved without haste, but with intention, shrugging out of his coat as he approached. The fabric was heavy, lined, the kind made to outlast brutal places. Etta understood before he spoke. "No," she said quietly, not in defiance, but in fear. "He won't make it if I move him." Jonah crouched beside her, close enough now that she could see the scars at his knuckles, pale against weathered skin. "He won't make it if you stay," he replied, voice low, steady. He didn't reach for Ash. He reached for Etta, meeting her eyes, letting her see the certainty there without forcing it on her. For a long moment, only the storm answered them. Then Ash whimpered, a small sound that cut through the wind. Etta's resolve cracked. She nodded once, the motion barely there, and Jonah moved. He lifted Ash with a gentleness that surprised even himself, cradling the dog's stiff body against his chest, turning slightly so the wind struck his back instead. Etta struggled to her feet, dizziness rushing in. Jonah caught her elbow without comment, steadying her, then released her just as quickly, preserving the fragile dignity she clung to. They crossed the street together, 3 figures blurred by snow. The town hall loomed ahead, dark and silent, its windows boarded against the storm. Jonah reached the door and knocked once. Not loud, not desperate, just enough to be heard by anyone willing to listen. Nothing happened. He knocked again, slower this time. A light flickered inside. Footsteps approached, hesitant. The door opened a crack, and Sheriff Amos Reed peered out, his face drawn, eyes widening when he saw what stood before him. "We need warmth," Jonah said. No accusation, no plea, just fact. The sheriff hesitated, glancing back into the building where a generator hummed and voices murmured. For a second, the town balanced on the edge of a decision it had avoided for years. Then Amos stepped aside. "Come in." Warmth rushed out to meet them, shocking in its immediacy. Etta gasped softly as sensation returned to her fingers, pain blooming sharp and bright. Jonah carried Ash inside and laid him near the fire, easing him down onto a folded blanket someone wordlessly pushed forward. Etta knelt beside Ash, her hands hovering, unsure, until Jonah placed them gently on the dog's chest. "Feel that," he said. "He's still here." The room filled slowly. Clara Whitcomb stood near the back, arms crossed, watching with an expression that wavered between shame and concern. Someone brought water. Someone else found another blanket. No one spoke much. Words felt too large for the space. Hours passed in fragments. Ash's breathing steadied, then faltered, then steadied again. Etta remained on the floor, unwilling to move, her body aching, her mind fixed on the small, stubborn life beneath her palms. Jonah sat across from her, close enough that their knees nearly touched. He didn't offer conversation, only presence. At some point, she spoke anyway. She told him about the classroom with the cracked chalkboard, about the way children's voices sounded when they discovered a word they loved. He told her about oceans that went on forever, about nights when the horizon disappeared and you learned to trust instruments you couldn't see. Their stories met in the quiet, overlapping not in detail, but in weight. Near dawn, Ash shifted. His tail tapped the blanket once. The sound was soft, but it carried through the room like a bell. Etta laughed, the sound thin and disbelieving, and pressed her face into Ash's fur. Jonah closed his eyes, just for a second. Morning crept in pale and unsure. The storm loosened its grip, leaving the town wrapped in silence and snow. Sunlight found the windows, glinting off ice, touching faces that had not slept. Etta stood when she could, every joint protesting. She felt eyes on her now, not sliding past, not judging, but seeing. Clara stepped forward, holding a cup of tea with both hands. "I'm sorry," she said, the words awkward but real. Etta accepted the cup, nodding once. Jonah waited by the door as the town began to stir. When Etta joined him, Ash bundled carefully in her arms. He spoke softly. "I've got a place just outside town. It's warm. You don't owe me anything." Etta looked at him for a long time. "Ash first," she said. "Not a question. A truth." Jonah smiled, small and unguarded. "Always." They stepped out into the morning together. The air was still cold, but it no longer felt cruel. Behind them, Frostfall Ridge watched, changed in ways it would only understand later. Some storms, Etta knew now, did not come to break you. They came to reveal who would stand beside you when the world went quiet. And as Jonah walked at her side, carrying the door open without a word, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not rescue, not relief, but the steady, warming weight of belonging. If you've ever walked through a season where the cold seemed endless, remember this. It only takes one small act of courage, one hand extended without judgment, to turn survival into something softer, something human. Stay close to stories like this. Subscribe and keep listening. There are still whispers in the snow, waiting to be heard. Footsteps passed. Boots. Men's voices, muffled by scarves. Someone laughed. Someone else coughed. The sound faded, and with it, the brief illusion that help might wander close enough to trip over them. Later, when the light changed and the storm paused just long enough to breathe, Frostfall Ridge revealed itself in fragments. The general store stood stubborn and square, its windows fogged from the inside. The church bell tower disappeared into a veil of snow, ringing only in memory. Smoke rose from chimneys, thin and confident. Etta stood when she could, leaning heavily on the wall. Her knees protested, sharp pain flaring like a warning. She ignored it. Pain was at least proof she was still here. Ash tried to stand with her and failed, his back legs trembling before giving way. He looked up at her, embarrassed, as if he had done something wrong. "Oh no," she said softly, kneeling again. "Not you. Never you." She reached into her pocket and found half a biscuit, hard as stone. She broke it with careful fingers and held it out. Ash sniffed it, then nudged her hand away, eyes fixed on her face. He had learned that rule early. She ate first. He would starve before breaking it. Etta laughed once, breathless and surprised, and the sound turned into something dangerously close to a sob. She took a small bite, forcing it down, then offered the rest again. Only then did Ash eat, slow and deliberate, as if savoring more than taste. Across town, Clara Whitcomb stood behind her counter, watching the storm through the glass. "She's still out there," she said to no one in particular. "I saw her last night." Someone hummed in response. Another voice muttered that some people chose their lives. The words floated, unchallenged, and settled like dust. Sheriff Amos Reed paused outside the store, snow collecting on his hat. He looked down the street toward the hardware store, toward the place where the awning sagged like a tired spine. His hand tightened around his coffee cup. Then he turned away, telling himself he would check later, telling himself many things. Etta had once taught children how to read weather from the sky, how to tell when snow would fall heavy or light. She had told them storms were honest. They showed you exactly what they were. People, she had warned, were harder. A truck rolled into town just before noon, tires chained, engine growling low and steady. It moved slowly, not because it had to, but because the man driving it had learned the value of patience. Jonah Blackwood parked near the edge of the square and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the wind move around him. He hadn't planned on stopping in Frostfall Ridge. The map had suggested it, but maps didn't know everything. Still, something had tightened in his chest as he drove past the shuttered storefronts, past the way the town seemed to hold itself inward, like it was bracing for judgment. He saw the dog first. Ash's shape was wrong against the white, too still, too intent. Jonah followed the line of the dog's gaze and found Etta, her back bent, her face carved by cold and years. Their eyes met across the street, and for a moment neither of them moved. Jonah had learned, in other storms, not to rush. He stepped out of the truck slowly, boots crunching loud in the quiet. Etta stiffened, one hand tightening in Ash's fur. She had learned different lessons. Jonah stopped a few paces away. Close enough to help, far enough to leave choice intact. He took off his gloves and held them out, palm open, the gesture simple and unadorned. Etta looked at the gloves as if they might speak. "We're fine," she said, though her voice shook. Pride lived deep, even when everything else had been stripped away. Jonah nodded once. "All right." He set the gloves on the crate beside her instead of pressing them into her hands. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a can of food next to them. Dog food. He had noticed the way Ash's eyes tracked every movement. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer explanations. He stepped back, giving the space back to her, and returned to his truck. Etta waited until the engine started again before she reached for the gloves. They were warm. The heat startled her more than the kindness. She pulled them on with careful fingers, afraid the moment might shatter if she moved too quickly. Ash sniffed the can, tail giving a hopeful twitch. She pressed her forehead to his. "We'll see," she whispered. The afternoon wore on. The storm gathered itself again, stronger this time, as if offended by the brief pause. Snow fell heavier, faster. The town closed in, shutters drawn, lights lit early. Jonah watched from his truck, hands clenched, as the wind pushed Etta further into the corner of the awning. Ash tried to stand again. His legs buckled immediately. Something inside Jonah shifted then, not urgency, but certainty. He opened his door, the wind tearing it wide, and stepped back into the cold. Etta saw him coming and shook her head before he could speak. "Not yet," she said. "He needs a minute." Jonah knelt anyway, careful, slow. He reached out, not to touch, but to steady Ash's blanket against the wind. Their breaths fogged the air between them. Two strangers bound by the same quiet fear. The storm howled, and somewhere deep beneath it, Frostfall Ridge held its breath. The night was coming fast now, and with it, the kind of cold that did not forgive mistakes. The storm had been waiting for her. It came without drama, without thunder, just a tightening of the air, a sharpening of cold, the way winter leans closer when it recognizes someone it has met before. Snow moved sideways across Frostfall Ridge, thin needles stinging the skin, erasing footprints almost as soon as they were made. Beneath the crooked awning of an abandoned hardware store, Etta Mae Calder pulled her coat tighter, though it had long ago stopped pretending it could keep the cold out. Ash pressed against her legs, his ribs rising and falling in shallow, stubborn breaths. His fur, once the color of fresh bark, had gone silver around the muzzle, and ice clung to his whiskers like tiny white stars. Every few seconds, his tail thumped weakly against the frozen ground, not from joy, but from instinct. As long as he could move, he would remind her that she wasn't alone. Etta rested her gloved hand on his head. The glove was split at the thumb, stuffing peeking through like a secret she could no longer hide. "Easy now," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who the words were meant for. The wind swallowed them anyway. Winter had a way of making people disappear. Not all at once. First, it took your warmth, then your color, then your name. In Frostfall Ridge, Etta had been gone for years without ever leaving. By morning, the town would wake and call this storm inconvenient. The bakery would open late. The school would cancel classes. Someone would complain about the roads. No one would mention the woman beneath the awning, because mentioning her would require seeing her, and seeing her would mean answering questions no one wanted to carry home. A door opened across the street. Warm yellow light spilled out, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. Etta watched it the way one watches a memory, without expectation. Once, she had owned a house with windows like that. Once, children had filled it with noise, tracking snow inside, laughing when she scolded them half-heartedly. Once, she had been useful. Ash shifted, his paw scraping weakly against the concrete. Etta felt the change in his weight immediately. She crouched lower, sheltering him with her body, letting the snow collect on her shoulders instead. "I know," she murmured. "I know."